Hey guys, it's Miko here. Some of you guys requested me to create a CapLab 3 IR mix tutorial, and this is exactly what it is. I use the same approach for all the genres, everything from metal to rock, country to pop. Obviously, the older the genre, the darker the tone will be. Darker meaning that the more low end and less high end, and the modern genres kind of require a brighter tone. Brighter meaning more treble, less bass, more balanced, I guess. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is start with a balanced amp setting. Balanced meaning the equal amount of lows, mids and trebles and even presence if possible. If you're lazy like me, you don't want to start tweaking stuff like that straight out of the box. Just use something like a Friedman HBE amp sim or an EVH, that's the 5153 amp sim in the Axe-Fx. Or for example Brit Silver that I'm using here. There are plenty of other balanced amps in the Axe-Fx also, but these are really good ones, I think. Then remember, you will be using your ears, so you need to excite as many frequencies as possible, meaning that you should play some chords with a driven tone even when creating a clean IR, just so you hear the frequencies a lot better. Obviously you need some good monitoring to get the best results. Let's get started. Let me start talking about the mics first. So my packs come with the SM57, E906, MD421, the Royer 121 and the M160. I would say that the SM57 is kind of the basis for all guitar tones, for me personally. I always start with the SM57, that'll be the main tone and everything else is kind of supporting that mic. The next mic that we have here is the E906, which is kind of similar to the SM57, but it doesn't have the same middle frequency emphasis as the SM57. If you don't like the SM57, then I suggest you start with the E906. It's maybe a little bit more neutral sounding, but on the other hand, I like the unneutral sound of the SM57, and that's kind of why I use it a lot. The Royer 121 kind of has the low-end rumble going on, so if I ever need it in a guitar tone, I'll use the Royer to kind of beef up my guitar sound. The M160 is also a ribbon mic just like the R121, but it doesn't have that much low-end, so if I'm going for more of a modern tone, but I still need some low-end, I'll usually blend in the M160 with an SM57. The MD421 is my favorite mix mic, meaning that it sounds awesome when it's mixed with an SM57. On its own, it's probably not gonna work that well, but it's definitely the best sounding mic with the SM57 for me. You get a bright and fat tone just blending these two together, and it doesn't have that low end rumble, so you get this ultra tight tone that way. Remember, the more IRs you blend in together, the more mids you'll get, but you'll lose clarity. So you have to find the right balance of mics. Okay, so let's get started here. I'm using a Brit Silver amp sim, and everything is set at noon except for the master volume here. These are stock settings, by the way, and I already pre-recorded a clip that I'm going to use for demonstrating this tutorial. So I'm going to press play and then go through the IRs and try to find something that I like. So, like I said before, I always start with an SM57 and I compare all the SM57 IRs in here, and for some reason I just preferred the B1 here. It had kind of a depth to it that the other IRs didn't have. Although it had a lot of low end, it was a tight low end, it wasn't a loose one. For example, the D1 was darker than the B1, but it was not that, it wasn't that tight. Let's compare these two, for example. So when I'm doing that chuck chuck, when I'm playing the guitar, chugga chugga, you'll hear that the low end is a lot tighter in this one than this one. And I cannot emphasize enough that we're doing all this with our ears, so you need good monitoring to do this properly. Okay, so I've chosen one IR. Now, usually what I do is, for my own tones, I go through the MD421 IRs and kind of see which one works best with the IR that I already chose. So it's going to be a little bit harder this time since we have so many MD421 IRs here, and they're not all going to fit here. So I'm just going to actually search for the worst one. I'm not going to pick that one up, but I'll throw all the other ones in here. And then let's compare how they sound with the SM57 we already chose. Okay, so I prefer the MD421 on the K100 here altogether. Why? Well, it's a fuller sound. On the V30 it's kind of a scooped sound, and it can have some whistly frequencies in there also, but that's not the case with the K100, so I just much prefer these K100 MD421 options here. So here's the interesting part now. Using CapLab here and having these IRs in here, we have some options. I'll show you guys a cool trick that I like to use sometimes. When you press this button here, you get more options here. And I'm gonna phase reverse the SM57. And it's gonna sound weird, but I'm gonna go through these IRs and see which one sounds kind of worst, meaning that there's no note definition, it's just something like noise, like or something that there's no note definition or anything in there. So the one that sounds the worst will be the best in this use case, because we're going to phase reverse that. So it's kind of going to delete that noise and give you more note definition. So let's go for it. That already sounds quite terrible. So I think it's a tie between the A1 and the D1. They both sounded quite terrible. So let's compare between these two. I feel like with the D1 there was still some note definition in there, but with the A1 it was just pure noise, so I believe that one will be the best blend mic here. So now when I press this button again, it'll switch the phase, and these should actually sound pretty good together. And now just with the SM57. So this is exactly what you want to get when you only use one of these mics, like for example the SM57 or the MD421 on their own. They don't sound as good as when they're being used together. And that's something that doesn't always happen with blending IRs. So this tone already would be usable in a mix. It's actually quite bright, so it would be great for a modern tone. But let's take this further, because it would be a really boring tutorial if I just stopped it here. let's go through some other mic options that we have here. So if I wanted to get a huge low end, I would probably use the Royer. And since we actually have kind of right tone going on right now, we might actually go for that. But I think I'm going to use M160 just because I want to be able to use this tone for a modern tone. So let's have the loop going once again, and I'll see which of the M160 IRs is the best. Okay, so I prefer the V30 ones. I think this one sounded the best here on its own, but that's not what we're going for here. We want to know how well these work together with these IRs in here. So I'm just going to pick them all and drag them to these slots here. And let's do the same thing. But this time, well, we can actually do this. Phase reverse both of these two. And then see how these sound together. Okay, so I think the D1 sounded worst here. So I still, because I preferred the A before, I'm gonna A-B them the normal way, just so I'm sure, because this is not, you know, pure science all the time. Let's see how they sound. Oh, whoops. So as you can see here, if I would have chosen this IR out of context, I would have gone with this one. But once I compared these two together and did the phase trick and everything, I preferred this one, and actually that's the one I'm going to go with. It was a lot better for this use case, and it works best with these IRs in here. So what I'm trying to say here is that you should not go through these IRs and just choose the ones that you preferred and then just blend them together, because that doesn't mean that they work together perfectly. That's not the way it's done. You should always use them in context like this. So I think these three IRs are the perfect balance of tones right now. If I wanted to, I could blend in more IRs, but that's not needed in my opinion. The more IRs I throw in there, I start losing the character of the tone that I'm going for, and I end up with something that's a bit mushy. So 3 mics is good enough. So let's have a listen. Okay, so while that was playing, I actually picked up my guitar again, and it sounds really good. Just so I can prove that this works with other amps, I'm just gonna go for a random amp, something completely different. For example, let's go for a rectifier, for example. Oh man, I'm not sure if I know how to tweak this. Okay. yeah, as you can hear, it works with a rectifier also. The reason I tweaked it is because it's nowhere near balanced. It has a lot more low end than most guys will ever need. But sure, this mic combo seemed to work the best for me. So in real life, if you'd be doing something like this, these are two separate cabinets. So you'd place one mic on the bottom right speaker of a V30 4x12 diesel cab, and one mic on the top left on that same cab, and then an MT421 on another cab, a K100 loaded 4x12 diesel cab on the bottom left speaker, and fine-tune those positions, and then you'd end up with something like this. So yeah, IRs really make it a lot easier for us to achieve these tones. I think that's the end of this part 1. I'm gonna say that it's a part 1 because I think I will be getting some follow-up questions, and I want to answer those, obviously. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this has been helpful for you guys.